So we are officially starting our pseudo subcommittee meeting. January 5th, the Community Survey Planning Subcommittee, pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting of the Community Survey Planning Subcommittee of the Westboro Diversity and Inclusion Committee will be conducted on Wednesday, January 5th via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Members of the public who wish to access the meeting may do so by joining the Zoom meeting that's listed in the agenda. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time. In this case, this meeting is being recorded and will be shared with Westboro TV to post on their website. If for any reason there is a problem with this recording, we will make sure we post minutes as soon as possible. Okay, so for the agenda, we're just going to review the discussions that have been had so far and make a plan for what the next steps are, essentially. All right. So I don't know where everybody else is. I haven't heard from anybody, but I'll just assume that everyone else's lives are chaotic like mine is right now, and that life got in the way, which is understandable. So I'm sure that you saw the document. What are your thoughts on it, just in general? Or is there anything from our meeting last month that you want to kind of like rehash or discuss?
I don't want to rehash anything. I looked at this as we sort of went through it, and Shelby kind of had some comments in the last, and so I think we just worked through it. I think it's close. I think it's really close.
Okay. Do you think I captured the like points that were made in the last meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I just lost the track. There it is.
Okay.
No, I do. I do, and I think it's. I think the key pieces were that to sort of remember our scope, and
and the limits of our scope.
Yes, exactly, and that this would be managed, from my understanding, really within the town manager's office, but with involvement, we would hope, from committee members. And I think you captured that. I think that was important to note, because otherwise I think it gets a little, that requires oversight, that as volunteers and people who have other jobs within town. I think that would be really challenging to do.
It would be impossible, truthfully.
Yeah, and I don't think it would be a service to really getting the full survey, and for the consultants that would be hired, I think it would be really challenging. So I think you captured that, and I think the in terms of kind of the goal of this document is to say this is the meat of what would be in the RFP, right? Because this is what we're looking to get from a consultant, because these are the questions that we're looking to be answered. So I think, again, we're close. I think it's just a couple little tweaks, and I think we'll be able to. And then the goal of this is to present this to the select board, correct?
Correct. To present it to the select board, because that is just procedurally the first line for anything that might end up on a town meeting warrant or in the hands of the public. So
so can I just make I don't know how deep a dive you want to go, if you want to go line by line. I'm just on number 2 on page 2. Say proposed outcomes. Can we say deliverables? Because I feel like outcomes kind of makes people think that, or it may be misunderstood, that we are looking for a specific. I feel like a deliverable is this is what they're going to deliver to us, that would become actionable.
Yes.
If the town decides that these are things that are valuable to go forward with.
Yes. Let me do something here real quick.
So the first would just be, so the biggest deliverable is the report, right? And that is the report is the summary of the work that will be done around gathering this information, right?
Yes.
And gathering the information may be done by survey or in some in-person or remote, depending on the situation, sessions to gather information. So yeah, I
Okay,
think
I might have you repeat a little bit of that because I'm just
I'm
saving
sorry.
this as a
I'm just
new version. It's okay.
sorry.
No,
Just
no, totally fine. I didn't communicate that. Just gonna save it as another version. Okay, now I can work on it steadily. All right, so proposed deliverables, and then if you don't mind repeating what you just said.
So it actually is covered under community survey options on the first page where it says tailored to town of Westboro, likely to include a written survey, paper options.
Yeah.
And I think on the paper options, we may want to add multilingual paper options.
Oh, we do. We absolutely need to do. I think the electronic as well.
Correct. Yes, I agree.
Survey.
And then it goes on to say what I was saying, the in-person. So there's focus groups, listening sessions, or other means of data collection. So I think it's covered if we just add the multilingual there.
Okay, I am happy to share this document as I'm working on it if you want me to, but otherwise, okay.
No, I'm good with reviewing it afterwards because I think, again, once the red changes are accepted and which I believe was what you just did, and now your new ones will be included in the next version. Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
Yeah.
So you'll see that what else did I do? I think I added a couple of questions to be answered or expanded upon some of
Yes.
them based on the conversations we had.
Yes.
Yeah, mostly I didn't add a whole much substance. I just kind of elaborated on most things.
You're talking about E on page 3.
Just in general. But please, I welcome you to just go through any particulars that like you just did. So
Okay.
Is there anything else? What else?
No, I'm down to the next.
Okay.
I'm down to the next page where, yeah, on page 3 where you have E, F, and G. I think those are good because I think we were kind of getting a bit stuck on, I don't know if stuck is the right word, but I think we were really trying to elaborate on why do we feel like, what is the case for doing this?
Yeah.
And I think referencing, it's true, the pandemic has highlighted what you have under E. I think that's great. And I think it's true and is really, go ahead.
Oh no, please continue.
I think that a lot, it's the catalyst, right? There were events that happened during here that really highlighted changes and gaps in service. So I think that's a really important thing to note. And so as we move forward, we want to be sure that those gaps are closing.
Yes, thank you. That's good. And in full disclosure, I also know that as we're getting ready to propose this, the town is also looking at how to spend ARPA funds. So the American Recovering Rescue Plan. And so I know that's on people's minds too, about the fact that ARPA really emphasizes funding for marginalized communities and for those who are most disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. So, and when I say we're, I actually mean are. So I thought that would also be just a timely tie to say, like, there's lots of entities that are saying this is a priority.
Yes, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense.
And then I wasn't sure, like, yeah, thank you for the feedback about how I rephrased it, because I don't feel like I don't want the burden of responsibility myself to be to summarize what the school is doing and summarize what the Economic Development Committee is doing. I don't feel like that's my responsibility, but just to reference it so that the decision makers can make, a reference to look into that on their own if they want to.
Yeah, and I think that it's important that we have, for me, the goal of diversity and inclusion is that it is included in all of the different services, that it's not just sort of siloed off under D&I. You know what I mean? So I think it's important that those things, to highlight that those things are already taking place in the schools, in the Economic Development Committee, and I'm assuming in other departments of town government.
Mhm.
And it should be, right? Because that should be always on the table and always included. And so I think the way that you have it here references that. And I think that's
Okay.
a good thing. Yeah.
Do you?
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
And
go.
I think the point that you're making too is all of these sort of separate activities are happening, which is wonderful. And what is going to bring them all together to say, where are the findings and what can we do collectively, right? We have our individual mandates, but then what do we do collectively as the town to address these gaps?
I'm gonna make a note of that. Because I think I can say that explicitly, like that this effort is an opportunity to do this collectively and bring all of these separate efforts together.
Mhm.
So I'll weave that in. What do you think? So in E, those examples are literally off the top of my head. Just what I know are little things or not so little things the different departments have done. By no means is it all inclusive. I don't even know that these are the best examples, but is it worth putting in a few examples? Or do you think that, and if I do, does it matter that it's not all inclusive? Like, what's the value of those bullet points?
I think the value is noting that there's work in progress, but
Okay.
I think maybe it leads to a question of are these the services that are most needed? Because that's really the question, right? These are some of the findings for the individual efforts. I don't mean individual, I mean the departmental efforts. Are those the services that are most needed across the town, right? Because if this is happening, if it seems like language, being multilingual is a primary need that's been identified in multiple departments. So then how do we take that across all the services that are offered? Yeah, so I think it's fine to, I don't think it needs to be you couldn't possibly have an all-inclusive. So
I mean, I could go hunt down some more examples. Like, for example, like I know the library has, culturally specific sections at the request and sort of demand of different culturally specific or linguistically specific or religiously specific groups. So that's an example too, but I don't know much about that. So I don't want to talk about what I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that makes sense. I think, they have hotspots available too for borrowing. I think that's a super important thing for access.
Yes.
And again, I think that these are great examples of work in progress that's, happening now. But the question really is, because I think this is under the whole, why is this important? Is this, are these the primary needs? Like, is this addressing the primary needs? Because that's really big, from my understanding of reading all the documents, that's the biggest question is where are these gaps and what can be done to address them? And I think obviously you have town departments that might be doing this work within their department, but unless we get full feedback from citizens, we won't know the answer to that.
Yes. Thank you. That's helpful. All right, anything else in that section?
No.
Number 4, those those are just like things from anti-racism education, right? Like these are just the things I've learned as a aspiring anti-racist, that if you're going to impact systemic change, this has to be the case. But I didn't do any effort to cite resources there, or it's just sort of a statement, like, here's the deal. If it's going to happen, it has to happen from the top down.
Right.
Do you think I need any more like substance to that? Do I need to say where that thought comes from? Is it sort of universally understood enough to keep it there and use it?
I mean, I think there may be some people who would challenge it. Obviously, there there are people who are going to challenge it. You know, all kinds of things. I think because I think like when we're talking about, I agree with you, by the way, about, you know, where this is coming from, and I agree with you, but I think people, I think a cultural shift feels, can feel scary, right? Because it's a change. I think that the strategic plan, I think the bullet that talks about the strategic plan is a really important piece of
That's the key.
it,
Mhm.
you know, right? Because we do, you know, the purpose of town government is to serve all of our residents.
Mhm.
And so if we're finding that there are ways in which residents do not feel served or don't feel comfortable accessing services, or there are literally barriers to that, that is the root of the, you know, the purpose of this, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And that, I don't know if that requires a cultural shift, to be honest with you. I agree with you when it comes from an anti-racist perspective. I totally agree that that kind of needs to come from top down. But I think identifying gaps in services is the first part, and then identifying where those are coming from might be the second part. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I think, I guess I'm not, I don't know, I still don't know though if I should say this piece about cultural shift.
Well, I feel like the cultural shift is something.
Or is it implied and I don't need to say it out loud?
No, I don't know that it's, I guess that's what I'm saying, is I don't know that it's implied by doing this sort of a survey. Does that make, do you understand what I mean? I don't know that it's implied. I think that
Okay.
it's important. Personally, I think that it's important. But I think that you can do a sort of an assessment, you know, a community assessment, because that's really, I think that's what we're talking about doing here,
Yes.
right? I think you could do a community assessment without having that cultural shift yet.
Okay, I think you make a very good point, and now I do totally understand what you're saying. Yes, I think that I'm just going to remove A and B.
And I agree, personally, I agree with you, but
Of course, yeah.
I think from from the perspective of bringing to town meeting, I think what we need to do first is have the assessment, find the needs, and then say, okay, well, we found, assuming we find a gap in services that may be related to, for example, the thing that we just talked about with hotspots available at the library where people have access and services, and then diving into that to say, but why is there a lack of services? Is it that there's, you know, what is the need? And then when we dive into the underneath of it, that's to me when the culture shift can happen.
Yes, okay, I understand that. And I understand too, rereading this and having this conversation, that my perspective from my professional experience in this town, from my professional experience over time, from my personal and professional values and perspective, that while I believe a cultural change is necessary, that is coming from me. And what we're looking for is to really learn if indeed the data shows us that a shift, that changes towards around DEI are necessary. And so let me not say that a cultural shift is warranted. Let us actually get the data to tell us, and then get recommendations for how to, if needed, explore that. So I'll just take that.
And I think your personal experience as, you know, a town employee is really important. You've observed that, you see that. I value that. And I think, you know, other people will, you know, may have a similar experience. So that,
and I'll have to, and I'll have to decide, you know, when I present this information, or when our committee presents this information to the select board, you know, how much of an introduction do I give to that? Because just like context wise, all of this was my idea, right? And I don't mean to, I'm not saying that in any way other than to say, like, I brought this to the committee, this idea to the committee because of my experience in youth and family services and in the community-based work that I do.
Right.
And so I do think that there's relevance to that, and that I think that that might be worth considering sharing. But since the proposal is on behalf of the entire committee, I would share that outside of the formality of the proposal, I guess is my.
Yeah. I think those two things can, certainly coexist, right?
Yeah.
Side by side. I mean, you have a vantage point of working with residents in this town, and you have seen firsthand what some of their experiences are.
Right.
And so you're bringing that experience. You can't separate your own experience.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. But I'm glad to have other eyes on it, i.e. yours at this moment, to help me tease out what is mine and what is the committee's and what is relevant for the purpose of persuading the powers that be to move forward on this. And I appreciate your helping me to hone in on that a little bit more. All right. Anything else related to the outline itself and the content?
No, I think it's the right length. I think it does, it answers the questions that we had initially, and I think that the select board will have.
Okay, good. So I do know the feedback at the last meeting was that we need to see if we could get updated demographics.
Right.
Since the most recent that I had when I started this process last summer was 2017. So we probably do have 2020 data, or at least 2019 data from the community survey, which is related to the census. So somebody, one of us, or maybe so we can volunteer someone else on the committee to like just update the data around demographics. Other than that, I think all we got to do is write this up. Yeah.
So that's the piece that I'm not. So I don't know what sort of format it needs to be included in, and what does a presentation to the board entail? Like, who goes?
Well, I don't know. I don't know that there's any kind of formal process, although there is that new handbook that I sent out to y'all yesterday. I haven't looked at it yet, so I'm going to see if there's anything in it that is news to me. I expect there will be. So maybe that'll give some direction about that. But otherwise, when we had the Indigenous Peoples Day conversation, it was literally, I just wrote a letter on behalf of the committee based on what we came up with, based on an outline similar to this. And I wrote a letter, and I read the letter to the select board and sent it to them. But this is a little bit more in depth, and it has involved a whole lot more process or a very different process, I should say. And so I think it's going to be more elaborate, but what I don't know is, do I write a letter similar to what I did before that is just basically a narrative of this outline and give it to them, and then either just talk to them about it, summarize it to them in person, or read it to them in person? Or do I do a PowerPoint presentation that encompasses this information and have that be it? Or do I do a combination of the two? My inclination is to do a combination. My inclination is to do a letter that has every bit of this in it, in the narrative, detail. And then to do a PowerPoint that highlights demographics, that highlights the questions, that highlights the desired deliverables, proposed deliverables. What are your thoughts about that?
I agree. I agree with the combo, the letter and the presentation, slide deck. I think one thing that we should also note that, sorry, just came back to me. Under, I think we're also asking for funding, right, for this?
Yes.
Okay. So because that's not in the proposal, so we need to ask for funding to support this hire of the consultant.
Yes, thank you.
And I think that you have a range, and I think if we you have a range based on other towns, what their experience was, right?
Yes,
So I think that we probably want to close that range a little bit, because I think if we say it's X, if there's a $30,000 gap, you might be approved for the lower end of it.
Right.
And I think realistically right now, it's probably on the higher end just because of the logistics of how, what it might take a consultant to pull like listening sessions together is a little bit more challenging right now.
Well, it's very true. And luckily, when I was talking to Kim Foster about this, about process and procedure,
Yeah.
she explained to me that in presenting this to the board, we can also say, we have a very vague idea of what this would cost.
Okay.
And it's a bit of a wide range, but we recognize that what we're really looking for is to have consultants help us figure out what it's going to take to get to the deliverables we desire.
Yeah.
And that might mean that they suggest surveys of multiple different kinds of surveys executed over time, in which case we would spend, some funds now, some funds in 2 years, and some funds in 4 years, or whatever. And that could mean a very different funding amount, so, or we could do this like that Andover did it, and it could be, all of this, and like the survey and the report could be the $25,000, but then I also know Andover hired other people to then help them implement the recommendations on the report. So sort of acknowledge, so Kim, in other words, Kim said, it is okay to go in with a pretty rough number and say to the board, we're going to be looking for consultants to recommend to us how we do this. And that might mean we spend just $25,000 right now for a survey, or it might mean that we decide to do this differently and break it into multiple steps, and it'll be a different cost. But we don't want to limit ourselves by saying we're only going to spend $25,000 period, and then we're stuck with not getting the deliverables we desire. So even if it's going to cost us more, we might decide not to spend it all now, but in order to be thorough, we want to really know what's out there.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think it's important to have a realistic sense of the range, and also not be limited by that, because the RFP process will sort of shake out a consultant who's going to make recommendations that's not based on that number, but is instead based on the need. And so I think that's important to do. Otherwise you are limiting, you're limiting the responses that you're going to get from consultants. But I do think we need to sort of capture here that there is a funding request.
Thank you.
I mean, and it does say higher, like,
but I'll be explicit. Yeah. And I know the first question I'll be asked is there grant money available to do this? And my answer will be, there might be. Right. And that might be one of the next steps that we take in pursuing this process. But right. I've decided that's not research we're going to do prior to this proposal.
I think that makes sense. Yeah. Because in doing the research, you want to know that there's an interest.
Yeah, exactly. And I've learned from being on this committee, how much to put in up front and how much to wait to put in until after you get, a read for what. Yeah.
And there may be grant money that's available, and then there's the question of, well, okay, but are there other things in line for that same grant money? And that's really a very big question.
Yeah, totally. Okay. All right, next steps.
Yeah, you were saying about the letter and then the presentation. So is there
any part of that you are inspired to take the lead on, or at least assist with?
I mean, I can assist with, but I'm not able to do a lead on that.
Okay.
Right now. Yeah.
Totally fine. I mean, I'm pretty knee deep in this, so I will probably just make the effort to start writing it and look to you all for editing. I might ask other folks to kind of make sure my data is updated. And what else? Oh, I'll just ask you this question. So I don't know if you've bothered to, I didn't ask anybody to, but look at any of the footnotes Did you happen to look at any of the
I did not.
footnotes? Okay,
No,
I didn't expect you to,
Mhm.
but there's lots of really super interesting information
Oh.
in all of the footnotes. And so,
I did look at this when it was, because I think some of this was in some of the other documents, some of the previous
Yeah.
documents. So I did look at it then. Yeah.
okay, cool.
Mhm.
So I think I'll keep the footnotes in with the narrative. But I guess one of the things I was thinking of asking you all is if you found anything in those references that you thought was worth highlighting in ways I haven't,
Mhm.
then, let me know.
Okay.
I don't really have the bandwidth to go in and look it all over.
Yeah, no, there were, I think it's interesting, and I can do that.
Mhm.
And then I can also take a look at the census, because
Okay,
there are census numbers that are up more, more
so
recent from.
newer. Okay.
Yeah. And then there are also the Department of Education numbers on demographics, and we
Yeah.
don't want to get too high, too deep into that, because I think that's part of the school survey.
Yes.
But also, but it is demographic information.
One thing I will do that I thought I had done, but it looks like I didn't, is I will reference the school survey results.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be easily accessed.
I think that was it was definitely in another document that,
Because the process that happens is that I'll submit this write-up, this report, this proposal to the select board a week before whatever day we're going to be on the agenda. And they'll get it electronically, and they'll read it electronically, and they'll be able to access the links in real
Right.
time.
Yeah.
And I'll ask,
so when do you need that? When is that?
well, let me look at the calendar here. I'm going to see when the next board meetings are. Huh. I don't know when the next board meeting will be. Maybe the 18th? Can't remember historically if it's the second or, which I know it's every other Tuesday, but I can never remember. Is it like the first and third or what?
Yeah, I don't know.
Let me see. I probably figure that out. I think it must be the second and fourth.
So I think there's a calendar. There's a town.
Yeah, I'm looking at the town calendar right now, but it doesn't have anything yet for January. And the last couple months is sort of confusing. So I'll find that out, but we need it before, a week before whatever board meeting it is. Our next meeting as a full committee is when? 2 weeks from now.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna,
It looks like the select board meets tonight.
yeah?
No, but I don't think so, because I think school committee is tonight.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I'm looking at the calendar, but yeah. All right. So we'll find out.
I know, I'll have to find out.
Okay.
And I'll ask Kim Foster, because she'll be able to advise me about that. But I have a feeling it might be the January 25th. There might be a date. I want to get it as soon as possible, but I'm trying to think timing wise.
Yeah.
If I think technically, if they're meeting on the 25th, everything for their packet is supposed to be in on the 19th, Wednesday the 19th. So we could give them a draft of it, and then take it to our committee and get feedback and give them an updated one. But that feels kind of messy, but at the same time, I'll tell you, I very strongly doubt that the larger committee will have much to say about it, because historically that's what happens, is there's not much to say about it. Like, they kind of trust the work of the subcommittee. And me and kind of just roll with it. So I don't know that, except for Shelby, often will take a fine tooth comb to things, but
And-
she's usually the only one.
But she has an important voice because she, obviously she knows how the select board works
She
pretty
does
well.
know how to the select board works, and she also acknowledges or sort of the potential conflict
Mhm.
of being on the committee and the select board.
Yeah, makes sense.
My words, not hers, but she has like just been conscious about
Yeah.
small committee work at this point moving forward because of how the last one went and stuff. So
Mhm. So I think, so you're saying, so our next meeting is the 20th, is that correct?
yes,
The different DNI committee?
the committee,
Okay.
yeah.
And can we hold on, can we bring it to the full committee first? No?
Yeah, I think we can, and we can give it. I'll check with Kim Foster and see what she thinks. I think we can give it to the board as late as February.
Well, or even if we just, is it possible to send it to our committee ahead of our meeting and ask for feedback, or is that, no, that's not possible for an open committee, open meeting?
Open meeting.
Got it. Okay.
I mean, we could do it with this. Well, no, we can't even do it with the subcommittee technically.
No, that's fine. Well, I don't know. You know this better than I do. I'm new to this whole, the scheduling of stuff. So what you feel is okay.
Yeah,
I'm comfortable.
I'll have to find out. I think
Okay.
what I'm unsure of. So town meetings in March. And from what I know, it's gonna be in March, although there has been little mutterings here and there of moving it out farther because some towns have it later in the year.
Mhm.
But the original thought of getting this was getting this to the select board in December to get a warrant article by March, but that didn't happen. And so then we were thinking January, and Kim kind of indicated to me that she thought that that would be enough time. But I think it also depends on how much time the town manager has, because we need to put together an RFP. We, being the town manager with our committee's input, needs to put together an RFP. Ideally, we'd put together an RFP before town meeting. We'd get some proposals back in order to be able to give town meeting a more clear vision of what we're asking for.
That's
just not going to happen.
No, that doesn't.
So I think we're probably looking at an October town meeting for this.
That feels more realistic, yeah.
And with that in mind, I feel less pressured around it.
Mhm.
And I mean, I hate to put it off that long, but I'm finally accepting that that's the way things work in municipal government, that you have an idea and it comes to fruition 3 years later. That's a slight exaggeration, but not entirely untrue.
No, I hear you. Well, we have constraints with the schedule and with the town meeting schedule.
Yeah.
But to get responses back, first of all, to even get an RFP written by March, I think is very optimistic.
It's not going to happen because I know
I don't think that.
If Kim and Christy are in charge of writing that RFP, it's not going to happen because they're getting ready for town meeting.
Right.
So that's not going to happen.
Right.
And it's not going to happen. And even for me, I'm thinking, yeah, let's get a draft of this written for the 20th.
Yeah, I mean, that's 6 weeks away. March is 6 weeks away. So sort of.
Good perspective. It's true.
So, that's, yeah.
No,
we're
it's
looking
true.
at October. So
Yeah,
I
okay.
think
All right.
let's so yeah, thinking sort of backing up from there. Yeah, now we can let's finalize this and maybe bring it to our committee next.
Yeah, let's do a draft of it and bring it to the committee on the 20th. I just realized I also need to bring a draft of the annual report for the committee by the 20th. I have to write an annual report for my department too.
Of course. Yeah.
All right.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. It's just life. It just goes like this. It's all like ebb and flow, right? Like last week was so incredibly quiet, and I took advantage by just like letting myself be kind of at ease. And now I'm like, why didn't I think of doing this and this and this and this last week? Well, because I actually had a whole week's worth of stuff to do and I was sick for a day. So anyway, all right. I think that's good. We're not going to vote to adjourn because there's no quorum and there's no, formality around it. So I'm going to adjourn and stop the recording.
Okay.
All right. There we go. Adjourned.
Okay.
Wait, how do I start the recording? There we go.